Hello everyone, today I'm going to show you all the books that I'm currently reading, which for me, that isn't too bad, so I'm just going to get straight into it. First up, I'm reading Carrie Fisher's Shockaholic. So Carrie Fisher very famously played Princess Leia in Star Wars, she's written loads of books, she's been in other films. This is non-fiction about when she had shock therapy, which we don't do anymore. They used to do it in mental hospitals where they used to send currents of electricity through people's brains, I know, to make them not ill anymore. So at this point she's had all loads of different therapy. She decided that her daughter should go and live with the little girl's dad because Carrie Fisher is still on drugs. She has bipolar disorder, she's severely depressed, and she wakes up next to her best friend. They've taken drugs together and her best friend is dead. So she is at a complete, vulnerable state, and then the hospital say to her, we've tried all this therapy with you haven't come off drugs, what about shock therapy? But they don't call it shock therapy, and she talks about the way they marketed it to her, and she very honestly says at first it worked. At first, every time I wanted to use drugs, I would go in and have shock therapy. I was going in 3 times a week, and it was suppressing me, it was stopping me from wanting drugs, but it was erasing her memory, and that's something that shock therapy did do. Many terrible side effects, but one of them was erasing memory. So the days before she would go to shock therapy, after shock therapy, she would lose those days. And she talks about that. This is very conversational. Carrie Fisher is a very jokey person, and I don't necessarily love it. If you like Caitlin Moran, you'll love her. I'm not a Caitlin Moran fan. Girl Interrupted by Susan Kaysen is a non-fiction book about Susan's time in a mental hospital, and it is, I think, better way of portraying mental health to people who don't suffer from it. So because I don't suffer from depression or bipolar, I need someone to put it quite raw and plainly to me so that I can really, it's a difficult read, Girl Interrupted, but it's such a fantastic raw book. Whereas because she's joking so much, I feel like I'm missing out on the full impact. So I've got to finish that off. I'm reading Everything Everything by Nicola Yoon. This is a YA about a girl who's allergic to everything, and she lives in her house, and the only people she interacts with is her mum and her carer. A new boy moves in next door to her and she becomes obsessed with him, and they form this friendship relationship. They fall in love straight away, so I don't like that first off. Secondly, some of the pages are just pictures, but pictures that I don't think are very necessary. So it's like a tiny picture on a whole page, and I don't think it's necessary. There's one bit in this where she buys a credit card and the whole page is a credit card receipt, and she could have just said in one line, I bought a credit card, and carried on. I feel like sometimes YA books put unnecessary pictures in it to just bulk out and fill the pages. Like, this doesn't need to be over 300 pages. So far, I think it's okay. I don't really like the romance element within it, but she is housebound, and I like how that's portrayed, because it's talking about little things that you wouldn't really pick up on. So there's a bit in it where she wants to get dressed for something, and then she realises none of her shoes fit her because she doesn't wear shoes. She's housebound. She has no need to go out of the house. And she realises that her feet have grown in the time that she has been housebound because it's been so long. And there's really hard-hitting, simple bits like that within it, which I wouldn't be able to write because I haven't been through that, but it's stuff you wouldn't think of that I think is really good in this. Then I'm going to punch myself in the face if I mention this book one more time in a currently reading TBR, because I just need to get through it. The Railway Children by E. Nesbitt. It's about some children who they believe their dad has just gone away for work, and they were living in a very nice middle class lifestyle, and then they have to go and live in a rural countryside with their mum, and very working class, and everything's scrimped back. And so they're dealing with that. They're 3 siblings, a boy and 2 girls, and the oldest girl, Bobby. Can we talk about her name for a minute? In this, her name is Roberta, but everyone calls her Bobby, and the author talks to you a lot within it, which I didn't enjoy, and says, I'm not going to keep calling her Roberta because everyone calls her Bobby, so we're going to call her Bobby from now on. Fine. And then the next page, she's calling her Roberta. What? Every other page, it's Bobby, Roberta, Bobby, just pick one. That's irritating. It's okay, it's really quaint little stories together. I feel like the film's better. The original film is stunningly beautiful, and it takes out all the boring bits because there's a lot in this about mechanics of a train, how a train works, different kind of train tracks, which I just wasn't interested in. So I just need to get through this, really. I'm over halfway, so pray for me guys on that one. A History of Britain in 21 Women by Jenny Murray. Found this in a bloody charity shop and I'm just dipping it in and out of it. Queen Elizabeth and Jane Austen, and then it has Emily Pankhurst and many different people within it. They have an illustration of the woman there, and then under it something the women said, and then it goes into each of them. I find this really interesting, finding about, you know, British history as a Brit, as a UKan. I would have changed up certain people, I've got to be honest, but this is obviously Jenny's interpretation, the people she wants. I would have popped in Anne Boleyn because Henry VIII, when he wanted to divorce his first wife to marry Anne Boleyn, that like messed up the church, and that was a massive political mess, so that would have been interesting to put in. I love my girl, I love it. Thank you so much, Janice, who I pen pal with, for this gorgeous Anne Boleyn card. It lives there now. But I would have put Anne in, and I would have put Amelia Earhart in it, definitely. But you know, that's my opinion, it doesn't really matter. The last book that I'm currently reading is The Diary of Frida Kahlo, which a lot of you have said you're interested in, and it's gorgeous. I did a whole video on this to do with Anne Boleyn as well, my girl. The Anne Boleyn Papers is a book filled with letters that Anne Boleyn wrote to different people that she never intended to be published. The Diary of Frida Kahlo is Frida Kahlo's actually diary from the last 10 years of her life that she never intended to be published. And I did a whole video, I'll link it down, talking about is that right or wrong after people die? Do they become public domain if they're public people? So in this, it is best to show you really. It's filled with illustrations from her diary. Some of it is just all text and writing. It's gorgeous. It's all written in Spanish. So then you go to the back of the book and you can follow it with each page, flick about, and it will have a page there, and then it will have the translation in English. A quick kind of rundown about Frida Kahlo. If you don't know who she is, you should know who she is. She was a Mexican artist. When she was 18, she was in a bus crash and she was actually impaled through her pelvis from it, and that's very important to her life because throughout her life she's been in and out of hospital having spinal surgeries, bone surgeries, loads of different stuff. She died at the age of 47 and she was a very famous artist. When she was 22 she married Diego, very important in her life, and she talks about him in here, her husband. So Diego at the time was 47, she was 22, her parents hated him. They actually said it looks like a dove marrying an elephant, something like that, because he was quite a big man. He'd been married twice before. He was called a womanizer, a player. Women loved Diego. God, I could talk about Frida Kahlo all day. But women loved him because at that time in Mexico, men were very macho and very controlling, and women were their possessions, and that was the norm, apart from with Diego. And Diego was very sensitive, and him and Frida Kahlo had a relationship that was over 20 years long. It was a massive relationship right up to her death, and even though she was younger than him, she died before him. People think Frida Kahlo committed suicide. What happened is she was in hospital, as always. She spent long periods of time bedbound. She was in hospital having a operation, and she was given some painkillers, and she took more painkillers than she was supposed to. So this book is the last 10 years of her life. Very interesting years, because the years when she was a very successful artist, she had this very turbulent relationship with her husband, which I'll go into in a minute, which is so fascinating, and then she was going through all these medical conditions and she was in and out of hospital all the time. So her and Diego's relationship, they were together for 10 years. He then had loads of affairs in those 10 years and had a relationship with her sister. So they got divorced, and a year later they got remarried. But the conditions of their remarriage was, she said, I don't want to have sex with you. But he went on to have loads of affairs, and so did Frida Kahlo. And Frida Kahlo had loads of affairs with men and women, and lots of female artists, painters, she had affairs with, and he knew that she was gay, and he was actually fine with her being gay. They never spoke about their affairs, and that was their life. There's a very interesting story where a woman who was in some Charlie Chaplin films, and she went on to be in a relationship with Charlie Chaplin. Diego had an affair with her, and then Frida had an affair with her. So they both had the same woman. She died at the age of 47, and he died 3 years after her. But the year after she died, he married another woman. He was a lot more famous than her when they first got together. How they met is she asked him for advice on her paintings. Diego has a very interesting life as well, because he's always been married throughout his life. So after his first wife, a year later he married someone else, and then after they broke up, he married Frida Kahlo the same year, and then when she died he married a woman. So he's always, a year later, he's always been married to someone. I find it very interesting, the two, like their complex relationship, but also them as individuals. He doesn't really get a lot of name checks. He did a lot of mural art. but his art is fantastic as well, and they're mentals and I love them. There's a story when she was actually bedbound and the doctor said you can't go to your show. She had a show of her artwork. You can't go to it because you're bedbound, you can't get out of bed. And she said, okay, I'll get someone to carry my bed into the gallery. And that's what happened. They carried her whole bed into this art gallery, like this huge entrance of her, like, I'll get here somehow. So that's it, babbling on too much about Anne Boleyn and Frida Kahlo as usual. But I hope you enjoy my currently reading pile. If you've read any of them, let me know. And I'll see you again soon for another video.